The ancient warning beacon drifted silently through the void, its metal surface scarred by countless cosmic dust impacts. For 300 years it had broadcast the same message to anyone who would listen. The signal was strong and clear, transmitted in 17 different galactic languages. Sol system, quarantine zone. Species classification, unpredictable. Approach with extreme caution, supreme. Tactician Vex Thara stared at the holographic display aboard the massive Zephyrian, battleship Dominion's edge. Her forearms moved gracefully as she manipulated the data streams, her scaled skin gleaming under the bridge's blue lights. Around her, the War Council of the Zephyrian hegemony waited in respectful silence. Ridiculous, Vex Thara finally said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 47 worlds. A single star system thinks it can warn off the greatest empire in the galaxy? Admiral Korthvex, his massive frame filling the command chair, leaned forward. The beacon is old, Supreme Tactician. Very old. Perhaps 3 centuries, maybe more. It predates our expansion into this sector. Which makes it even more pathetic, Vex Thara replied. 300 years ago, these humans hadn't even left their home planet. Now they've managed to spread to a few nearby worlds and think they're a threat to us? The tactical display showed the Sol system in detail. One inhabited world called Earth, with several billion humans living on its surface. A few space stations orbited the planet. Some small colonies existed on nearby worlds and moons. Their technology was primitive by Zephyrian standards. Their ships were slow and clunky. Their weapons were basic energy projectors and simple kinetic rounds. Commander Geltar, the intelligence officer, activated another display. Our scouts have been watching them for 2 standard cycles. They have approximately 400 combat vessels. Most are light cruisers or smaller. They have perhaps 20 ships that could be considered heavy warships. 400 ships, Vex Thara repeated with amusement. We have brought 3,000 vessels to this system alone. Our main battle fleet has 12,000 ships ready for deployment. The War Council members shifted in their seats, some making the clicking sounds that indicated agreement in Zephyrian culture. They had conquered species with better technology and larger fleets. This would be easy. What do we know about their behavior patterns? Asked Admiral Korthvex. Geltar consulted his datapad. Standard primitive species reactions. They fight amongst themselves frequently. Multiple nations and governments on their home world. No unified command structure. When we arrive in force, they will likely surrender quickly to avoid total destruction. Most primitive species do, this was true. In 3,000 years of expansion, the Zephyrian hegemony had encountered hundreds of species. The pattern was always the same. Show up with overwhelming force, demonstrate superior technology, and demand surrender. Most species were smart enough to recognize when they were beaten. Those that weren't learned quickly after a few demonstrations of Zephyrian firepower. Their military doctrine appears basic, Geltar continued. Ship-to-ship combat using traditional formations. Ground forces equipped with projectile weapons and simple armor. No evidence of advanced tactical thinking or irregular warfare capabilities. Vex Thara walked to the main viewing port and gazed out at the stars. Somewhere in this direction lay the Sol system and its defiant little beacon. She had conquered civilizations that spanned multiple star systems. She had brought down empires that had existed for millennia. These humans would be a footnote in the grand history of Zephyrian expansion. There is one concern, Supreme Tactician, Geltar said carefully. Speak. The beacon itself. Who placed it there and why? Our historical databases show no record of any species in this region that possessed such technology 3 centuries ago. Vex Thara considered this. It was unusual. Most warning beacons were placed by the inhabitants of a system to ward off raiders, or to mark dangerous spatial phenomena. But this beacon was more sophisticated than anything the humans should have been able to build 300 years ago. Perhaps another species placed it, suggested Admiral Korthvex. Some long-dead civilization that once lived in this region. Or perhaps the humans found it and simply changed the message, added Commander Geltar. They could have discovered ancient technology and repurposed it for their own use. Vex Thara nodded. Both explanations made sense. It doesn't matter. Whatever species originally built that beacon is clearly gone. We're dealing with the humans now, and they are nothing more than an obstacle to our expansion. She turned back to face the War Council. I've made my decision. We ignore the warning. These humans have something we need. Their world is rich in rare minerals, and their population will make excellent workers once properly trained. We proceed with the invasion as planned. The council members clicked their agreement. This was what they had expected. The Zephyrian hegemony had not become the dominant force in the galaxy by backing down from primitive threats. Admiral Korthvex, prepare the advance fleet for immediate departure. I want to be in the Sol system within 10 cycles. Commander Zeltar, begin preparing surrender demands in their primary languages. Keep them simple. These humans will need clear instructions on how to submit properly. As the War Council dispersed to carry out their orders, Vexithara remained at the viewing port. In her long career, she had learned to trust her instincts. Right now, those instincts told her this would be another easy conquest. The humans had placed their pathetic warning beacon at the edge of their system like a child putting up a sign saying, "Stay away," on their bedroom door. It was almost endearing in its futility. The beacon continued its endless broadcast, its message unchanged for 3 centuries. But as the massive Zephyrian fleet began moving toward the Sol system, the beacon's creators were not idle. Deep within the asteroid belt, human engineers worked frantically to complete projects that would soon test everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about primitive species. Vexithara had made her choice. The Zephyrian hegemony would ignore the warning. They would learn too late that some warnings exist not to protect the outsiders, but to protect them from what lies within. The greatest empire in the galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or numbers, but something far more dangerous: the absolute refusal to accept defeat, and the terrible creativity that came with desperation. Captain Sarah Chen gripped the armrests of her command chair as the bridge of the UES Defiance shook under enemy fire. Through the main screen, she watched the Zephyrian advance fleet emerge from hyperspace like a swarm of deadly insects. 1,200 alien warships appeared in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with an oily black sheen that seemed to absorb light. "Jesus Christ," whispered her tactical officer, Lieutenant Rodriguez. "How many are there?" "Too many," Sarah replied grimly. She activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We are now at war. These aliens came to our home without invitation, and with hostile intent. We're going to show them what a mistake that was." The alien fleet moved with mechanical precision toward Earth's orbital defense stations. Sarah had expected this. Military doctrine said you establish space superiority first, then move on ground targets. What she hadn't expected was the massive size of even their smallest ships. The Zephyrian light cruisers were larger than Earth's heaviest battleships. "Captain, incoming transmission from the alien fleet," reported Communications Officer Park. "Put it through." The main screen flickered and showed a tall, reptilian creature with 4 arms and cold calculating eyes. When it spoke, the universal translator rendered its words in a mechanical voice. "I am Supreme Tactician Vexthara of the Zephyrian hegemony. Your system is now under our control. Surrender immediately and your deaths will be quick. Resist and we will make your species suffer for generations before we grant you the mercy of extinction." Sarah stood up slowly. Around the bridge, her crew watched her with tense faces. She knew that across the solar system, thousands of other human crews were receiving the same message. This was humanity's moment of truth. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Defiance," she replied calmly. "I have a message for you and your fleet." Vexithara's scaled features showed mild interest. "You wish to discuss surrender terms?" Sarah smiled coldly. "Come and take it." She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. "Rodriguez, target their command ship. Park, broadcast our response to every human ship and station in the system. Helm, attack speed." What happened next would be studied in alien military academies for centuries, though not for the reasons the Zephyrians expected. The human fleet didn't engage in traditional ship-to-ship combat. Instead, they scattered like leaves in the wind, breaking into small groups that attacked from unexpected angles. The Defiance led a group of destroyers in a suicide run directly at the Zephyrian command ship, firing everything they had, while broadcasting human music at maximum volume. "What is that noise?" demanded Admiral Korthvex aboard the Dominion's Edge. "Some form of acoustic weapon," replied Commander Zeltar, his voice uncertain. "Though I cannot determine its tactical purpose. The acoustic weapon was actually Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival, followed by Born in the USA and the Star-Spangled Banner. To human ears, it was a defiant battle cry. To alien ears, it was simply baffling. But the music was just the beginning. As the battle progressed, the Zephyrians realized the humans were fighting unlike any species they had encountered. Human ships rammed alien vessels without hesitation. Captains detonated their own reactors to damage nearby enemy ships. Damaged human vessels didn't retreat. They accelerated toward the largest available target and exploded. Captain Marcus Webb of the heavy cruiser Indomitable proved particularly creative. When his weapons systems failed, he used his ship's industrial fabricators to create thousands of steel balls, then launched them at enemy ships using mining charges. The improvised shotgun blast tore through the hull of a Zephyrian battlecruiser. "They're using mining equipment as weapons," reported a shocked Zephyrian sensor officer. "Impossible," replied Vexthera. "Mining equipment cannot penetrate military-grade armor," but somehow it did. The humans seemed to have an instinctive understanding of how to turn anything into a weapon. Cargo ships became bombs. Civilian shuttles became missiles. Even their space stations contributed, launching everything from nuclear warheads to chunks of processed asteroid ore. The battle raged for 18 hours. When it ended, the Zephyrians held the field, but at a terrible cost. They had lost over 300 ships, a quarter of their advance fleet. Worse, the humans had evacuated most of their population from the orbital stations before the battle began. Entire cities had been packed into civilian transports and scattered throughout the outer system. "Where did they go?" demanded Vexithara as she surveyed the wreckage of Earth's orbital infrastructure. "Unknown, Supreme Tactician," replied Jeltar. "Our sensors detect thousands of small craft heading toward the asteroid belt, the outer planets, and the system's edge. They appear to be establishing hidden bases throughout the system. This was not how conquests were supposed to work. When you defeated a species' military and captured their major population centers, they surrendered. They didn't scatter into space and disappear. Send a message to the surviving human leadership," Vexthera ordered. "Inform them that we control their homeworld and demand immediate surrender." The response came 12 hours later from a source they couldn't trace. It appeared simultaneously on every screen in the Zephyrian fleet, accompanied by the image of a grizzled human in a torn military uniform. "This is Admiral James Morrison, commanding the Sol Defense Remnant," the human said calmly. "We've received your surrender demand. Our response is simple: go to hell. We don't have a homeworld anymore. You destroyed it. We don't have a government anymore. You scattered it. What we have is 4 billion very angry humans with nothing left to lose, scattered across a solar system we know better than you do. We're not an army anymore. We're not a navy. We're something much worse. We're civilians with military equipment and no rules of engagement." The transmission cut to images of human ships being rapidly modified in hidden asteroid bases. Civilian craft were being armed with military weapons. Mining ships were being converted into warships. Most disturbing of all, humans were dissecting captured Zephyrian technology and somehow making it work with their primitive systems. "You came here expecting to conquer a planet," Admiral Morrison continued. "Instead, you've walked into a solar system full of humans who just watched their home burn. Every asteroid belt, every moon, every chunk of ice in this system is now a potential base for people who have nothing left except revenge. You've made the biggest mistake in your species' history. You've taught humans that we can kill your ships and steal your technology." The transmission ended with a simple message that appeared in text across every Zephyrian screen. "Welcome to hell, Population U." Supreme Tactician Vexithera stared at the message for a long time. In her 3 centuries of military service, she had never encountered anything like this. Species that lost their homeworlds surrendered. They didn't scatter into space and declare war on the entire invasion force. "Supreme Tactician," Commander Jeltar said quietly, "perhaps we should request additional reinforcements." Vexithara nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand why someone had placed that warning beacon at the edge of the system, but it was too late to heed the warning now. The Zephyrian hegemony was committed to this fight, and the humans had just made it clear they would never stop fighting. The greatest empire in the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you ignored a warning designed not to protect them, but to protect them from humanity itself. 6 months after the initial invasion, Supreme Tactician Vexithera stood in what used to be the command center of Luna Station. The massive orbital facility now served as the Zephyrian headquarters for the Sol system, though control was becoming an increasingly generous term for their situation. "Report," she ordered as Commander Zeltar approached with his daily briefing tablet. "We've lost another supply convoy," Zeltar said grimly. The Prosperity's Dawn and its 6 escort ships were destroyed while en route from the outer system mining operations. Pirates again? No, Supreme Tactician. This was different. The attacking force used our own weapons against us. Modified Zephyrian plasma cannons mounted on human ship hulls. They knew exactly where to hit our ships to cause maximum damage with minimal shots. Vexithara's forearms twitched in frustration. This had been happening more and more frequently. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were learning. Every piece of Zephyrian technology they captured was quickly reverse-engineered and improved upon. "How is this possible?" she demanded. "Our technology is centuries ahead of theirs." "Dr. Marcus Webb," Zeltar replied, calling up a holographic profile. "Human scientist, formerly worked on their planetary defense systems. He's established a research facility somewhere in the asteroid belt. Our intelligence suggests he's leading their technology adaptation efforts." The profile showed a middle-aged human with graying hair and intense eyes. According to Zephyrian intelligence, Webb had somehow managed to not only understand alien technology, but actually make it better. Human-modified Zephyrian ships now outperformed the originals in speed, firepower, and efficiency. "It shouldn't be possible," Vexithara muttered. "Our bioships are grown, not built. The technology is organic, living. How can they possibly understand it well enough to modify it?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Vasquez, one of the few human scientists they had captured alive, had been brought in for questioning. She sat across from Vexithara in the interrogation chamber, her hands bound but her expression defiant. "You want to know how we figured out your ships?" Elena said with a slight smile. "It's actually pretty simple. Your bioships are just sophisticated organisms, and we've been studying biology for centuries." "Impossible," Vexithara replied. "These creatures were specially evolved on our home world over thousands of years." "Yeah, but evolution follows rules," Elena continued. "And once you understand the rules, you can play the game. Your ships are basically giant spacefaring organisms. They have nervous systems, digestive systems, even immune systems. All we had to do was introduce the right viruses." Vexithara felt a chill run through her scaled body. "What viruses?" Elena's smile widened. "The kind that make your ships think we're friendly. The kind that make their weapons target their own fleet instead of ours. The kind that make them really, really hungry for Zephyrian metal alloys instead of the asteroid minerals they're supposed to eat." Before Vexithara could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Through the interrogation chamber's window, she could see several Zephyrian bioships beginning to attack each other with no apparent provocation. "You see," Elena said conversationally, "the thing about biological warfare is that it spreads. Those modified viruses we introduced to your captured ships, they've been quietly spreading through your entire fleet for months. We just had to wait for the right moment to activate them." Vexithara rushed from the interrogation chamber to the command center, leaving Elena under guard. The tactical displays showed chaos throughout the Zephyrian fleet. Nearly a third of their bioships were either attacking each other or attempting to consume the metal hulls of nearby vessels. "How do we stop this?" demanded Admiral Korthvex as he arrived at the command center. "We don't," Zeltar replied grimly. "The infected ships have to be destroyed before the virus spreads further." But that was easier said than done. The humans had timed their biological attack perfectly. As the Zephyrian fleet turned its weapons on its own infected ships, human strike forces emerged from hidden bases throughout the system. They attacked the distracted alien fleet with coordinated precision, targeting command vessels and supply ships while the aliens were dealing with their internal crisis. Captain Sarah Chen, now commanding a modified Zephyrian heavy cruiser called the Defiance II, led the human assault. Her ship was a perfect example of human innovation. It retained the alien vessel's superior armor and weapons, while adding human-designed systems that made it faster and more maneuverable than anything in the Zephyrian fleet. "Target their command ships first," Sarah ordered. "They're having enough trouble with their own fleet. Let's make sure they can't coordinate a response." The battle was unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever experienced. They were fighting on 3 fronts simultaneously, against their own infected ships, against coordinated human attacks, and against a growing sense that they had completely underestimated their enemy. But the real shock came when the humans began broadcasting captured Zephyrian communications protocols throughout the system. Suddenly, every human ship could listen to alien tactical communications and coordinate. Their attacks based on intercepted enemy plans. They're listening to everything we say, reported a panicked Zephyrian communications. Officer, switch to backup encryption protocols, ordered. Vexthara, we already tried that. They broke those codes too. They're using our own quantum computers against us. It was true. Dr. Webb's research teams hadn't just reverse-engineered Zephyrian technology. They had improved it beyond what its creators thought possible. Human-modified quantum computers could process information faster than the original Zephyrian versions. Human-enhanced bioships could regenerate damage more quickly than natural ones. Human-adapted weapons could penetrate Zephyrian armor that should have been impervious. As the battle raged around Luna Station, Vexthara began to understand the true nature of their enemy. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were evolving. Every defeat taught them new lessons. Every captured piece of technology became a blueprint for something better. Every dead human became inspiration for the survivors to fight harder. Supreme Tactician, Geltar said quietly. I'm receiving reports from across the occupied territories. Human resistance cells are active on every world we've taken. They're not trying to reclaim their territory. They're stealing our technology and sharing it with other species. What other species? The Corvani system reported strange modifications to their rebel weapons. The Deltari Uprising is using tactics identical to human guerrilla warfare. The Nexus Trade Federation is asking questions about why we need so many reinforcements to hold a single-star system. Vexthara stared at the tactical display as another of her bioships succumbed to human viruses and began attacking its neighbors. The humans had done something unprecedented. They had turned the Zephyrian fleet against itself while simultaneously learning to use alien technology better than the aliens themselves. But worse than the military defeats was the realization that the humans were sharing their knowledge. Every species in Zephyrian-controlled space was watching this conflict with growing interest. They were seeing that the mighty hegemony could be beaten, that Zephyrian technology could be captured and improved upon. That resistance was not only possible but profitable. Send a message to High Command, Vexthara ordered. Request immediate reinforcements. Full battle fleets, not just advanced scouts. How many ships should I request? Asked Geltar. Vexthara watched as the Defiance II destroyed another Zephyrian heavy cruiser with weapons that had been designed on their own homeworld. The humans had turned Zephyrian strength into human advantage, and they were getting better at it every day. All of them, she replied. Request all of them. The massive Zephyrian reinforcement fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a dark cloud, blotting out the stars with their numbers. Supreme Admiral Techmore commanded 8 full battle fleets, over 6,000 warships, representing the largest military force the hegemony had assembled in 2 centuries. Supreme Tactician, Vexthara met the reinforcement fleet aboard Techmore's flagship, the colossal dreadnought Eternal Dominion. As she entered the war room, she could see the confidence in the Admiral's bearing. He had come to end this embarrassing situation and restore Zephyrian dominance. Explain to me, Thecamore said without preamble, how a primitive species in a single-star system has required the deployment of our largest battle fleet in living memory. Vexthara activated the holographic display, showing the current tactical situation. Admiral, these humans are unlike any species we have previously encountered. They do not follow standard military doctrine. They do not surrender when defeated. Most significantly, they adapt to our technology faster than we can deploy countermeasures. Impossible, scoffed Fleet Commander Zarthek. We have been perfecting our military technology for thousands of years. No primitive species could possibly. His words were cut off by proximity alarms. The main tactical display lit up with hundreds of new contacts emerging from the asteroid belt. But these weren't the crude human ships from the initial invasion. These were sleek, deadly vessels that bore the unmistakable curves of Zephyrian bioship design, but with modifications that made even the experienced alien officers pause. Admiral, reported the sensor officer, the approaching vessels appear to be heavily modified versions of our own ships. Their energy signatures are unusual. Admiral Kenji Nakamura commanded the human fleet from the bridge of his flagship, the Rising Sun. The vessel had begun life as a Zephyrian battlecruiser before human engineers had completely rebuilt it. Now it mounted human-designed weapons that could punch through Zephyrian armor like paper, powered by a human-modified reactor that produced twice the energy output of the original. All ships. This is Admiral Nakamura. He broadcast on open channels so the aliens could hear. Today we show these invaders what happens when you bring a knife to a gunfight in Texas. Attack Formation Delta 7. Give them hell. The human fleet moved with coordination that shocked the Zephyrian commanders. These weren't the desperate, chaotic attacks they had faced before. This was a professional military force using advanced tactics and superior technology. How are they coordinating so effectively? Demanded Thekmor as human ships seemed to anticipate every Zephyrian maneuver. They're using our own communication networks against us, Vexthara replied grimly. Every quantum communication array we establish, they hack within hours. They know our battle plans before we execute them. But the real shock came when the human ships opened fire. Their weapons weren't just modified Zephyrian technology. They were improvements that performed better than anything in the alien arsenal. Human-enhanced plasma cannons fired faster and hit harder. Human-modified bioships healed from damage more quickly than their natural counterparts. Human tactical computers could process battle data and adapt strategies in real time. This is impossible, whispered Fleet Commander Zartek as he watched a single human heavy cruiser destroy 3 Zephyrian battleships in rapid succession. Those weapons should not be able to penetrate our armor. The humans have been improving our technology for over a year, Vexithara explained. Every ship they capture, every weapon they study, every piece of equipment they recover, they make it better. The battle raged for 2 days. Despite their overwhelming numerical advantage, the Zephyrians found themselves struggling against an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move and counter their every tactic. Worse reports were coming in from across the galaxy that made Thekmor's blood run cold. Admiral, reported his intelligence officer, we're receiving urgent communications from 17 different sectors. Local species are requesting information about human resistance techniques and asking why we need so many ships to control a single system. What are they talking about? Demanded Thekmor. The humans have been broadcasting their battle tactics and technology modifications to every species in the galaxy, Vexthara replied. They're not keeping their innovations secret. They're sharing them with anyone who will listen. This was unprecedented in galactic history. When species developed effective weapons or tactics against Zephyrian forces, they kept them secret to maintain their advantage. But humans were different. They were actively teaching other species how to fight the hegemony. The intelligence reports got worse. The Corvani had used human-designed virus weapons to disable an entire Zephyrian patrol fleet. The Deltari were employing human guerrilla tactics with devastating effectiveness. 3 different species had requested technical advisors from the human resistance forces. Admiral, the communications officer called out urgently, incoming transmission from the Nexus Trade Federation. It's marked as Priority Alpha. Thekmor accepted the transmission and the image of Ambassador Veltara appeared on the main screen. The Nexus Federation had been neutral in galactic politics for centuries, serving as intermediaries between the various species and empires. Admiral Thekmor, Veltara said formally, the Federation Council has received numerous inquiries about the ongoing situation in the Sol system. Several member species are expressing concern about the stability of Zephyrian control in their regions. The situation is under control, Thekmor replied stiffly. With respect, Admiral, our intelligence suggests otherwise. We understand that a single system has required the deployment of nearly half the Zephyrian Navy. We also understand that several occupied species are now using advanced weapons and tactics of human origin. The Council wishes to know if the hegemony requires assistance in resolving this matter. The offer of help from the Neutral Federation was essentially a diplomatic way of saying that the entire galaxy was watching the Zephyrians struggle against humans and wondering if the great empire was as strong as it claimed to be. We require no assistance, Thekmor replied coldly. After cutting the transmission, he turned to face his staff. The tactical display showed that despite bringing 6,000 additional ships, they were barely holding their own against the human forces. Worse, every day brought new reports of uprisings in other systems, all using human innovations and tactics. Admiral, Vexthara said quietly, there's something else you need to understand about these humans. They don't just fight to win, they fight to teach others how to win. Every battle we engage in with them becomes a demonstration for the rest of the galaxy. As if to prove her point, a new wave of human ships emerged from hidden bases throughout the outer system. But these ships weren't alone. They were accompanied by vessels of other species. Corvani destroyers flew alongside human cruisers. Teltari fighters provided cover for human bombers. Even some Nexus Federation ships had quietly joined the battle on the human side. "My God," breathed the sensor officer. "The humans have formed an alliance. Multiple species are actively fighting alongside them." Admiral Nakamura's voice came through on open channels again. "Attention, Zephyrian fleet. This is no longer just humanity you're fighting. This is every species that's tired of your empire telling them how to live. Today we're all human. Today, we all fight for freedom." Deckmore stared at the tactical display as ships from a dozen different species coordinated their attacks with precision that rivaled his own fleet. The humans hadn't just learned to fight the Zephyrians, they had taught everyone else to fight them too. "Admiral," Vexithara said softly, "I think we're beginning to understand what that warning beacon was really trying to tell us. The greatest empire in the galaxy was facing its first major rebellion in 3 millennia, and it had all started because they had ignored a simple warning about approaching one species that refused to stay down. 2 years after the first Zephyrian ships had crossed into the Sol system, Supreme Tactician Vexithara stood in the ruins of what had once been the greatest empire in the galaxy. The command center of her flagship was dark, most systems powered down to conserve energy. Around her, the few remaining officers worked quietly at their stations, monitoring reports of defeat from across Zephyrian space. "Supreme Tactician," Commander Geltar said softly, "the Altair system has fallen. The local human advisors helped the rebel forces disable our orbital fortresses using the same virus techniques they developed against our bioships." Vexthara nodded wearily. It was the same story everywhere. Human technical advisors appeared wherever rebellions started, teaching other species how to turn Zephyrian technology against itself. What had begun as one species' desperate resistance had become a galaxy-wide revolution. "How many systems remain under our control?" she asked. 17, Geltar replied, "down from over 300 at the start of this conflict. 17 systems. The mighty Zephyrian hegemony, which had once controlled a quarter of the galaxy, now held fewer worlds than some minor trade federations, all because they had ignored a simple warning beacon. The main display activated, showing an incoming transmission from Admiral Nakamura aboard his flagship. The human commander looked older than he had 2 years ago, but his eyes held the quiet satisfaction of a man who had accomplished something impossible. "Supreme Tactician Vexthara," Nakamura said formally, "I'm transmitting the terms for the final ceasefire." "You mean surrender terms?" Vexithara replied bitterly. "No," Nakamura said firmly. "Ceasefire terms. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy, and we don't want to destroy the Zephyrian species. We just want you to leave other people alone." The terms appeared on secondary screens throughout the command center. They were surprisingly moderate. The Zephyrians could keep their remaining 17 systems, but they had to recognize the independence of all rebel worlds and promise not to expand their territory for 50 standard years. They also had to allow human observers to monitor compliance with the agreement. "And if we refuse?" Vexthara asked. Nakamura's expression grew serious. "Then this war continues until your empire no longer exists. Every day you delay, more of your worlds join the rebellion. Every week that passes, more species learn our techniques for fighting your technology. You've already lost everything except your core worlds. Don't make us take those too." It wasn't an empty threat. The tactical reports made that clear. Human-trained rebel fleets were converging on the remaining Zephyrian strongholds. Weapons that had taken the aliens centuries to develop were being mass-produced by species who had learned human manufacturing techniques. The revolution had gained unstoppable momentum. "Why?" Vexithara asked suddenly. "Why are you offering us terms instead of total victory? You could destroy us completely." Nakamura was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because that's not who we are. Humans fight when we have to, but we don't fight to destroy. We fight to protect. Right now, we're protecting every species in the galaxy from your empire, including your own people from your government's mistakes." He paused, then continued. "Besides, someone needs to remember what happened here. Someone needs to remember that when you ignore warnings about approaching humanity, you don't just risk losing a battle. You risk losing everything you've built." After the transmission ended, Vexthara walked to the viewing port and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, The ancient warning beacon still broadcast its message to anyone who would listen. She finally understood what it had really meant. The beacon hadn't been placed there to protect outsiders from human weapons or technology. It had been placed there to protect them from human nature. The refusal to accept defeat. The drive to turn every setback into a learning experience, and most dangerous of all, the compulsion to share that knowledge with anyone else who was fighting for freedom. "Commander Geltar," she called. "Yes, Supreme Tactician. Prepare a message to High Command. Inform them that we accept the human terms. All of them? All of them." She turned away from the viewing port. "And add something else to the message. Tell them to establish warning beacons around every human settlement we know about. Real warnings this time, not the arrogant dismissal we gave their beacon." What should the warning say? Vexthara considered this carefully. What warning could possibly capture what they had learned about humanity? How do you warn someone that they're about to encounter a species that makes everyone around them more dangerous? "Say this," she finally replied. "Humanity, approach with respect. Species classification, liberators. Do not threaten unless you want to teach the entire galaxy how to defeat you." Geltar typed the message, then paused. "Supreme Tactician, there's something else. The humans are requesting permission to send aid ships to our remaining worlds. Medical supplies, food, basic technology. They say their people want to help with reconstruction." Vexthara almost laughed. After destroying the greatest empire in galactic history, the humans wanted to send humanitarian aid to help rebuild it. It was perhaps the most human response imaginable. Fight you to the death if you threaten them, then immediately try to help you recover once you stop. "Tell them yes," she said. "And, Commander? When those aid ships arrive, I want our people to pay attention. We're going to need to learn from the humans if we want to survive in the galaxy they're creating." Months later, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the Defiance 3, watching construction crews work on the new interspecies research station orbiting Earth. The station would serve as a center for sharing technology and knowledge between all the species that had joined what historians were already calling the Liberation War. "Captain," her communications officer reported. "Incoming transmission from the Zephyrian representative." The image of Vexthara appeared on the main screen, but she looked different now. Less rigid, less arrogant. The defeat had changed her in ways that went beyond military loss. "Captain Chen," Vexthara said formally, "the Zephyrian Council has voted to request membership in your new Galactic Cooperation Initiative." Sarah smiled. "Former enemies are always welcome as long as they come in peace. We have one question," Vexthara continued. "That warning beacon your species placed at the edge of your system. Who actually built it?" Sarah's smile widened. "We did. About 300 years ago, when we first developed interstellar communication technology. We figured that if we ever met hostile aliens, we should at least try to warn them off before things got ugly." "Warn them off? But the beacon was clearly meant to protect them from us," Sarah finished. "We've been studying our own history for centuries. We know what humans do when they're threatened. We know what we're capable of when we're angry. We thought maybe if we warned people properly, they'd be smart enough to approach us peacefully instead of starting a war." Vexthara stared at the human captain for a long moment. You knew what would happen if someone invaded your system?" "We hoped it wouldn't come to that," Sarah replied. "But yes, we knew. The beacon wasn't arrogance, it was mercy. We were trying to save you from making the mistake you ultimately made." "And now?" Sarah looked out at the construction crews where humans worked alongside Zephyrians, Corvani, Deltari, and dozens of other species to build something new. "Now we're all building something better together." That was always the real point of the warning. Not to keep people away forever, but to make sure that when we finally met, it would be as friends instead of enemies. The transmission ended, and Sarah returned to watching the construction work. In the distance, she could see the ancient warning beacon being carefully disassembled by a joint human-alien salvage crew. It had served its purpose, though not in the way anyone had expected. The beacon had warned the galaxy about approaching humanity. Unfortunately for the Zephyrian hegemony, they had misunderstood the warning. They had thought it was a threat when it was actually mercy. Now the entire galaxy understood the real message. Humans fight hardest when they're protecting something, and they never fight alone for long. Approach them with respect and cooperation, and they'll share everything they know. Approach them with conquest and domination, and they'll teach everyone else how to defeat you. The warning had been ignored once, at the cost of an empire. It would not be ignored again.